Okay, in this video I'm going to talk more about using the compiler. Also going to talk a little bit about what you might see in some videos in this course as far as compilers go. So I'm using Replit here, and I've just created a new Replit called compilers, and here's my program that gets created, main.cpp. CPP means it's going to be a C++ source file. And recall from the instructions for Replit earlier on in the semester, the file needs to be called main.cpp. And this is what you get as your initial shell. So I want to talk about this. We're not going to be using this. This is, if you put std : in front of everything that comes from the standard namespace, this is what it would look like. This is not the syntax that's followed in our textbook, and it's not really the easiest for beginning programmers. So what we're going to do is we're not going to be using that syntax. Instead, we're going to be putting a statement up here using namespace standard. And you'll see this in my examples, and you'll see this in the Rebel examples, okay? And then when you do that, you don't have to put std : But basically what we're going to do when we write our own programs is just, delete this out, and this will be what we need to get started. So remember, this is the beginning, this is the end. In a lot of my examples, you might see the open curly brace here. It's personal preference. Replit likes it up here. I think in the Rebel textbook, you'll see it down here. It doesn't really matter one way or the other. Okay, so notice that the keywords over here are in blue, right? Include using namespace. If I come in here and I hit the enter key, you'll notice that it tabs over 2 spaces. And that's because we want to indent everything that's inside of main so we can easily see it's inside of main. So I'll just type a statement here. All right, and I like to maybe leave a blank line first. You can leave some blank lines to make things look easier. Then we can run it. All right, and it just displays hello on the screen. So maybe we want to put a new line character so the prompt will move down. So you could add a \n, right? That's a new line character. There's a difference between the \n and a /n. So \n is a new line character, right? So you'll see hello, and then it moves down to the next line. But if you put a /n in, right, it just displays /n, which is not what we want. Okay, so you can do that. And if you wanted to just show you here, you'll see hello, then down to the next line you'll see goodbye. And so you have 2 new line characters here. If you want to, and you can use endl instead, but with the endl, you need to close your string, put another output operator. All right, so endls don't go inside the strings like \n do. I probably use endls more than the Rebel textbook does. All right. And here we'll see hello and goodbye. Okay. All right, so that's up to you. You can break these lines apart at any point where you want. I might like to just move that over a little bit to show it's part of the same cout statement. You want to make sure that everything's neat and lined up. So the other thing you'll see in our textbook, a statement at the end which says return 0. Okay, that just means it's returning a 0 to the operating system, normal termination. Very common to have in a C++ program. In Replit, they don't seem to put it on there. It is somewhat optional, so you might see all the examples in Revel have returned 0 and it's not in Replit. It doesn't matter. You can put it in if you want. You don't have to have it in, and that's fine too. Okay. The other thing I'd like to talk about is in the videos you might see in this course, I'm using different compilers. For a while we used Visual Studio. That's a compiler that I like to use, but it was very cumbersome for beginning programming students. So sometimes you'll see me in Visual Studio. Then for a while we were using Dev C++, which is a relatively simple compiler. I wanted to get away from it because it doesn't use IntelliSense, meaning it doesn't give you keys while you're typing in your code for where there's where you might have syntax errors, which I'll talk about in a minute. You have to actually run the program and then you get error messages. It only works on Windows machines, so we made this switch here just to make it a little bit easier for students. So you might see me in Dev C++, you might see me in Visual Studio, you might see me in Replit. None of it matters because in all cases I'm just writing C++ code that's going to work in any compiler. So I just want you to understand that. The other thing that you might see in some examples is this. Please note, you don't need that at all. Don't be using that. If you see it in an example of mine, just disregard it. It is something that had to do with Visual Studio. If you didn't put that in your program would close automatically and you wouldn't see the output screen. So you guys don't need to use it. If you do see it in an example, just realize I was using Visual Studio, and that's the case, okay? All right, so that's what you need to know about the compiler. You want to make sure your code is nice, lined up, neat, easy to read. And the other thing is, let's just make an error in our code. Let me take off this semicolon, okay? And if I roll my mouse over this, it says expected semicolon after expression. So these are syntax errors, right? Grammatical errors in the language. So, you know, watch out for them as you're typing, right? I need to have this on here, but I'll roll my mouse over this. Missing terminating character. Okay, oops. Let's say I forget this. Now this isn't great, right? Like reference to overload function could not be resolved. You need to call it. Okay, you're probably not going to know what that means, but you know, look at your code versus other code to hopefully figure out what's wrong. Let's say I forget this, right? I'll get a message, expected, you know, closing curly brace. So these are all syntax errors, and if you have a syntax error, your program's not going to run, right? It's just going to give you more error messages over here. To match this, one error generated, right? Basically, it's saying you've got an opening curly brace but no closing curly brace. So just note that you have to get rid of all of your syntax errors in order to get your program to run. Now, early on, we're going to be writing simple programs. Look at the sample programs in the Revel book, in my book, for the syntax clues that you need to help you, right? A lot of times, you know, you guys like to Google an error message. It's generally does not help you. That's probably early on the best way is to look at other sample codes similar to what you're doing, seeing what you're missing. Other common things, you know, if I forget this line of code, right, anything that's in the standard namespace like cout and endel are going to be error messages, and then it'll say, did you mean to use std : cout and std : endel? No, don't be fixing it that way. Oops, sorry. You can fix it this way. Okay, if you spell something wrong, right? Let's see, now I get an error message down here. It doesn't know what cout is because I don't have the right library up here. So these are things that you have to be very careful of. Also notice C++ is case sensitive. That means uppercase and lowercase letters are very different. You can't type an uppercase C. That doesn't work. See? Like that. So a case sensitive language. All right, so that's a little bit more about what you need to know about the compiler, how to fix syntax errors, and how to make your code look nice and neat, and a little bit more about compilers and sample code in this course.